2 years ago. It comes at a time that is delicately balanced both internationally as well as domestically. Globally, if you look at it, India has taken a very slightly different position, a nuanced position away from the position taken by its friends and partners in the West, namely America and Europe, on doing business with Russia since this war began. India has imported far more oil and even defense equipment from Russia since this war began, something that the West is unhappy about. Domestically, the Congress is putting pressure on the government, saying that Mr. Modi can go to Moscow, but he cannot go to Manipur. Today, the leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, was in Manipur. It's the second time he's visiting Manipur, a state that's been besieged by ethnic violence for the better part of the last year. The question is, why should one be seen as priority over the other? Why should one be used to play politics over the other? After all, the India-Russia strategic partnership is something that has been there in existence for the better part of the last 30 years. It was started not by a BJP government, but by a Congress government. So should we avoid playing politics on something as sensitive and as important as strategic ties with Russia?
I went to Moscow at the end of the year, and at that time I carried a message from the Prime Minister that look, we are committed to the annual summit and we will do it sooner rather than later.
नॉन-बायोलॉजिकल प्रधानमंत्री मॉस्को जा रहे हैं, राहुल जी नेता प्रतिपक्ष लोकसभा में हैं, वो मणिपुर गए हैं। ये दिखाता है, और पिछले 17 महीने में प्रधानमंत्री ने मणिपुर के बारे में कुछ कहा ही नहीं।
All right, so let's decode the layers of the India-Russia strategic partnership. Remember, India and Russia have had a partnership going all the way back to the Cold War, the mid-1950s, when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister of the country. He was the one who initiated the Soviet partnership with New Delhi. In 1971, when Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister, during the Bangladesh War, there was a treaty strengthening ties. Remember, the Soviet Union back then sent an armed frigate to deter the Americans from siding with Pakistan during the Bangladesh War. In 1993, when Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister, the Treaty of India-Russia Friendship and Cooperation was signed. That's when the strategic partnership was established. For the better part of the last 30 years, we've had a strategic ties with Moscow. Russia has and continues to be the top arms supplier for India. Even today, even though India's arms supplies have been diversified, more than 50% of our aircraft, submarines, tanks and missiles come from Russia. Take the biggest names. INS Vikramaditya used to be Admiral Gorshkov, the aircraft carrier, which was again bought from Russia. The Sukhoi M30 MKIs, again bought from Russia. The MiG fighter jets, the latest version, the MiG-29s, again bought from Russia. The Akula submarines, the T-90 tanks, and now the latest, the S-400 missile defense systems, all procured from Russia. There are key collaborations in the defense sector as well. The BrahMos supersonic missile system was a joint effort by both Russian and Indian military scientists. Russian oil, particularly so since the start of this war, is now accounting for anywhere between a fifth and a quarter of all of India's annual crude imports. But it's not all hunky-dory. It's not all a bed of roses. There are some significant challenges and pressure points. One being the ever-expanding Russia-China axis. This is a cause of concern for India, particularly because of the ongoing tensions at the line of actual control. The last thing India wants is further bonhomie between Moscow and Beijing. India's expanding ties with the US, with Japan, with Australia through the Quad partnership is something that is an irritant, certainly for Russia and also for its new emerging friend and partner, China. The defense partnership, like I said, India has expanded its defense partnership. It is diversified to newer countries, suppliers, whether it is France, Israel, the United States. In fact, the Indo-US defense cooperation is expected to cross $20 billion. Western pressure on India taking a different stand, what India calls a neutral stand as far as the Ukraine war is concerned. Remember, India has not taken part in any of the resolutions of the United Nations condemning Russia for its war. Neither did India take part in the peace summit that happened recently in Switzerland. The European Union also has concerns over India reselling Russian oil refined as fuel back into Europe. So there are concerns and challenges, certainly something that will come up in the conversation between President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. But let's keep the focus on those who are saying that Prime Minister Modi should not be going to Moscow. He should instead be going to Manipur, which is where today the leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, was. His second visit to that state. It is a state that's been rife with ethnic violence for the better part of the last year. Can we reduce matters of strategic interest and foreign policy to petty politics for domestic political point scoring, as it were? Dr. Vasily Kashin is a senior research fellow at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. Shazia Ilmi, national spokesperson of the BJP. Salman Soz, national spokesperson of the Congress Party. Pinakaranjan Chakravarti is former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Shazia Ilmi, this is the Congress's contention that, look, Manipur is burning. It's been burning for the better part of a year. Mr. Modi did not find time to go to Manipur. Even the RSS chief is talking about Manipur. But Mr. Modi has all the time in the world to go to Moscow, go to a private dinner with Mr. Putin. But he can't go to Manipur as Rahul Gandhi is going to Manipur.
Well, one can't understand how one can compare the two scenarios. It is, of course, very unfortunate as to what is going on in Manipur, which has been a difficult situation for a long time. After all, we've had 10 presidential rule crisis situations in Manipur. It has seen 10 presidential rules in the last many years, since 1972. And not just that, we know what happened from between 93 to 98. And of course, things have been terrible in Manipur. There's been a lot of animosity that we've seen, an ethnic strife over there. But that does not mean that Rahul Gandhi will continue to do politics of that kind. And on the eve of a very crucial summit between India and Russia. So I don't know what kind of connections or dots he's trying to connect. But clearly it's not making a sense to anybody. And when Prime Minister was indeed talking about Manipur and giving details of what has been done over there, they decided to walk out. That is the opposition under the leadership of the LOP, Rahul Gandhi. So it's indeed unfortunate. Whereas when you look at now Russia and this summit, all eyes are in it. So much so that the Kremlin spokesperson says that all eyes, especially the West, is on this crucial summit. And people are monitoring this all over the world at this point of time.
Salman Soz, is it fair to play politics on something like this?
I think it's very unfortunate.
Because let's face it, the strategic partnership with Russia was established way back during the time of the Cold War when Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was Prime Minister. In 1971, we signed the India-Russia Friendship Treaty. In fact, the Russians sent an armed frigate to deter the Americans from siding with Pakistan during the Bangladesh War. In 1993, when Narasimha Rao was Prime Minister, we signed the strategic partnership, the Indo-Russia Friendship and Peace and Cooperation Agreement. My point is that this is a long-lasting, durable strategic partnership we have with a country from whom we still, even today, import 50% of our defense equipment and a quarter of our oil requirements. Why should the Prime Minister not go to Moscow?
Zaka, the framing of this question is totally wrong. Of course, Russia is an invaluable partner for India, and on foreign policy, we're all together. There is no opposition versus the ruling party. But it is a matter of great shame that the Prime Minister, in the last more than a year, in a state where more than 220 people have been killed, more than 60,000 have been displaced from their homes, the Prime Minister has not found one opportunity to visit that state. It's almost as if that state does not matter. In fact, Manipur must have been one of those rare states where the Prime Minister did not even campaign. So this, whether it could have been any other country right now where the Prime Minister would go, it reminds us. It is a reminder to everyone in the country that the Prime Minister finds finds time, and as he has to deal with foreign policy. But he's not found time for Manipur. It's shocking, it's shameful. And so every time he goes outside, the people of the country must be wondering, why is it so difficult for him to visit his fellow countrymen and women in Manipur or some state like that?
But isn't that a false equivalence,
this is not
Salman? Isn't that a false equivalence? Because the stakes in the relationship with Russia, particularly at a time when there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, there are democratic elections.
I reject your.
Give me 10 seconds. Give me 10 seconds. Give me 10 seconds. Let me finish my question. Salman, you can reject it after I finish my question. The reason I say it's a false equivalence is because if there is any reason why we should be strengthening our partnership with Russia right now, is because of the prevailing geopolitical circumstances. The Russia-Ukraine war has upended geopolitics and geoeconomics as we know it. I just talked about how India imports a quarter of its oil requirements from Russia just now, a moment ago. Most importantly, the last thing you want, Salman, is Russia going directly into the China orbit or the China axis, into China's embracing arms, because the more Russia moves in the direction of Beijing, the problem is for India, particularly at the border, because China then becomes more emboldened to take more aggressive action on the border.
But Zakat, this is not about an equivalence. This is not about Russia. We're not criticizing Russia or this relationship because that's a crucial relationship for India. Why would we criticize that? What we are saying is that the Prime Minister finds time to go to other countries when, of course, it is needed as part of his official duty, and he should. But what we're saying is that he's not found time for more than a year to go to a state that is burning. And remember, Zaka, no matter how much our foreign ties are important, and they are strategic, very important, but nothing is more important than the people of India, those who are suffering. Because when we are strong at home, when we are united at home, we can take on anybody.
Okay.
So this is not about Russia. So there is no false equivalence.
Okay. I'm glad you make that. I'm glad you made that distinction. Okay, yeah. 10 seconds, Shazia, and then I'll go to the other two.
I just want to say 10 seconds. I think it's such a myopic way of looking at things, and it's rather petty, if I can say so. I mean, if India strikes a good deal for itself when it comes to buying the crude oil at the best price possible, isn't it a matter of great, not just pride, but doesn't it make Indians happy because we are working at looking at our own interests, and it helps India and our economy and our interests most of all? Or does Congress say that you will do politics on every issue, and no matter what happens, you will keep on talking about Manipur? I mean, by that logic, I can say, why doesn't Rahul Gandhi go to West Bengal or to Tamil Nadu?
Yeah, okay. Let me get the strategic policy view in on this. I want to first go across to Vasily Kashin, Dr. Kashin, and then after that to Ambassador Chakravarti. Dr. Kashin, what is the view from Moscow? Clearly, India has not entirely sided with Russia in this war against Ukraine. Yet at the same time, India has not even once voted in any resolution that condemns Russian actions in Ukraine since the start of this war, either at the UN Security Council or even the General Assembly votes. Even recently, the peace summit that happened in Switzerland at the behest of the Swiss government, India was a participant in that, but it refused to sign the final declaration saying that any kind of ceasefire or any kind of solution has to have Russian participation and Russian involvement. So on the one hand, India seems to have, carved out a separate path from its friends and partners in the West, America, Europe, etc. And it's walking a bit of a tightrope to try and, if not defend Russia, but at least certainly not come across as alienating Russia. Yet at the same time, India has genuine concerns. Recently, President Putin was in Beijing. He was treated as a state guest there. The friendship between Beijing and Moscow has just flourished, particularly since this war began. We all remember how the last visit that President Putin made just before this war began was to Beijing. And one of the first visits that he made after this war began was also, and after it subsided for a bit, was also to Beijing. There is a genuine fear here in India that the stronger the embrace or the friendship between Beijing and Moscow gets, the worry here is for India, particularly because of our contentious border issue between China and India.
So, thank you very much. I believe that actions are always more important than words. And during this period of Ukrainian conflict, India became an absolutely key partner to Russia. We had absolutely tremendous growth of our bilateral trade to $65 billion last year. No one thought that would be possible. And what we need now is to improve this trade and make it more balanced, because currently India is just buying huge amounts of Russian crude oil and is absolutely not using opportunities of taking over the Russian market. We have about $65 billion of bilateral trade. First quarter this year, it was $17 billion of trade, but of that $17 billion, something like $15 billion was Russian export to India. India is still exporting very little to Russia. The Chinese, after the Ukrainian war has started, they had a policy. They declared that they would take over the Russian market abandoned by Europeans. And now Russia is global market #1 for Chinese cars, for example. That required effort, a lot of work being done to bypass sanctions, maintain trade flows, maintain financial flows between the two countries. If we manage to do the same with Indians, we'll see tremendous opportunities, dozens of billions of dollars of Indian export to Russia per year. I talk about cars, medical, drugs, manufacturing products. We just need to do a little homework for that. And that is absolutely important for Russia, because currently we do see certain elements, certain parts of Russian market completely being taken over by the Chinese. We don't need to see our economy monopolized, and India is the only possible competitor in many parts of the Russian market for China. So there is huge potential, and that is potentially a very important visit, and some very important deals might be made.
I do want to ask Ambassador Chakravarti, at one level, one could argue it is in one's own self-interest to make sure that you have eggs in every basket. So clearly no one is saying that India should completely side with the West as far as the position on Russia-Ukraine war is concerned, or it should simply side with Russia as far as, oil imports and defense imports are concerned. But how long will India continue to have, one foot in each boat, as it were? Because you have the Quad with the United States, Japan, Australia, which clearly irks the Chinese, and they have made no bones about it. They have, in fact, even told the Russians to sort of weigh in with India as far as the Quad is concerned. And yet, at the same time, we're also upsetting our Western partners and friends because of the oil imports, because of the defense imports. And I don't think it's lost on anyone, Ambassador Chakravarti, that tomorrow you have a NATO meeting happening in Washington. 30 countries of NATO are coming together, and you also have the India-Russia annual summit. The timing is certainly not lost on anyone.
Well, that's a coincidence that I do not know why it happened. But let me point out that what you just said about neutrality, etc. During the height of the Cold War, there was an American Secretary of State who called non-alignment an immoral policy, because they wanted India to be on their side during the Cold War. Now, what is new here? We don't want to take sides. That is simple as that. We want to retain our strategic autonomy. We have relationship with both sides, with the US, with the Russians, and now we have a rising China, and that's why we joined the Quad. So I think there is a delicate game of multipolar balancing going on here, and I don't think that India must discard or just wish away our long partnership with Russia. We just cannot do that. And people talk about in the West, for example, that this is a legacy problem. it is not a legacy problem. I think they are putting it in a different jargon. I think it is because of India's deep core interests that we are doing what we are doing. And don't forget that the energy security that Russia has provided us, otherwise we'd be paying 500 rupees per liter for a liter of diesel or petrol. And I think Russia has been very generous to us in terms of giving us discounted, gas and oil. And why shouldn't we take it? As Minister Hardeep Puri once said, we will buy oil from wherever it is cheaper for the benefit of our people.
On the other issue of using foreign policy to score domestic political points, in this instance, of course, the Congress and the opposition are saying Mr. Modi goes to Moscow, he doesn't have the time or the inclination to go to Manipur. Even in the campaign trail, the recently concluded elections, Ambassador, I want to know your thoughts as a former diplomat. Look at the issue of Kachativu, for example. What was thought of as a settled international issue was taken up on the campaign trail. And of course, there was politics back and forth around it. Is this something that is healthy?
Well, I think domestic politics sometimes intrudes into certain issues that we as foreign policy and strategic experts would prefer that it did not happen. But then again, that is politics in a country like India, where the opposition has every right to say what it wants to say. But then the whole debate will be with, people will be watching all this. And I think this business of saying that, why didn't he go to Manipur? Why is he going to Moscow? I think for us, since we are foreign policy and strategic in the strategic era, we don't make that connection. That is for the politicians to do. But they are welcome to do that. But I think our relations with Russia are very, very important. And I would dare say that in the current situation of the international order as it is developing, it has become more important for India.
So Salman, what is also of worry is, like I said, I don't have the exact number of times, but since this war began, the meetings between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have been more than any two world leaders of such comparable countries than any other two world leaders. They've met, I think, about half a dozen times in the last 2 years since this war began. Shouldn't that be a matter of concern for India? And precisely for that reason, shouldn't the Prime Minister be going to Moscow and engaging with the Russians, ensuring that the Russians are not entirely in the Chinese corner? Because we have a problem with the land boundary with China. It's been going on for the better part of the last 4 years. It is still unresolved. And the last thing we want is an important strategic partner like Russia, leaving our corner and going off to the Chinese corner. Salman Soz. I think you're on mute. You need to unmute.
Zaka, could you quickly repeat, because it was not clear?
No, I'm saying the Congress party has a problem with the Prime Minister going and visiting Mr. Putin and taking part in this annual summit. This annual summit, one second, let me finish. This annual summit, by the way, was started in the early 2000s. It continued through all the 10 years of the UPA 1 and UPA 2. In fact, Dr. Manmohan Singh, when he was Prime Minister, met with Mr. Putin, who was president for some time in that period, and then there was President Medvedev as well, who was the leader of the country for a brief time. Dr. Manmohan Singh met with these two leaders as many as 16 times in his 10 years as Prime Minister. This is Mr. Modi's 11th meeting with Mr. Putin in the last 10 years. So, if at all anybody has met Moscow and leaders in Moscow far more, it is Dr. Manmohan Singh. So, if it's kosher for Dr. Singh to travel to Moscow, shouldn't it be kosher for Prime Minister Modi to travel to Moscow?
What is this? What is this, Zaka? What are you asking? The Congress party is not saying that he should not go and meet Mr. Putin. Of course he should. It is in India's interest to maintain, as the Ambassador Chakravarti said, it is our right to pursue our foreign policy the way we want, the way we think is good for the country. That is not an issue for the Congress party. For the Congress party, for the India alliance, there's a big issue right now, and that is that the Prime Minister has not found time to visit Manipur. It is that simple. It has nothing to do with why is he meeting Mr. Putin. Of course he should meet Mr. Putin. But the point is,
when you draw that comparison, Modi goes to Moscow, Rahul goes to Manipur. What is the deduction? What is the inference?
Zaka, he could go to meet the American president, he could meet the Chinese president. That's not the issue. The issue is that he finds time for the other activities, including foreign visits, but he's not found time for Manipur. Our own people have been killed. His people have been killed. And he has not had 1 minute that he could spend or spare for them so that he could wipe their tears.
No, but aren't you juxtaposing?
This is not the
aren't
issue.
you juxtaposing? When you say Modi goes to Moscow and Rahul goes to Manipur.
Yes.
Rahul Gandhi did not go to Sandesh Khali to meet the victims there. I don't think he went to Tamil Nadu to meet with the people who died in the Hooch tragedy.
Let me come. Sandesh
didn't
Khali,
go to
the BJP
Telangana,
Sandesh Khali
where there
was totally empty and Khali usko chodo. The issue is, when it comes to NEET, for young people of this country, who goes to meet them? Rahul Gandhi goes to meet them. When there is Hathras, there is a huge tragedy in Hathras. The Prime Minister should be doing something. He doesn't do that. Rahul Gandhi goes there. Now Manipur, this is his third visit. The Prime Minister has not had, he's not probably spent more than 15 minutes talking about these people. They're his people. They're our people.
Okay.
They deserve time.
Shazia, so when it comes to genuine people's pain and hardship, whether it is Hathras, NEET, Manipur, it's Rahul Gandhi who is among the people, not the Prime Minister. That's what the Congress Party is saying.
So, Zakar, this endless whining that goes on ad nauseum, I think has no bearing on the situation that we're discussing right now on the eve of a very crucial summit. The whole world is looking at that. There is no equivalence whatsoever. And Jairam Ramesh, on the other hand, asks relevant questions, but just look at the lack of substance and complete seriousness in the matter. He draws a parallel and says, well, Manmohan Singh met 16 times and Modi only 11 times. Does that mean the relations between the two countries are not as sound as they used to be? Totally overlooking the fact that there has been a COVID crisis, there is a whole Russia-Ukraine conflict. The second question he asks, and he tweets about it and talks about the trade imbalance, which is actually huge. And that is one of the things that will be discussed, the trade deficit. And there is, of course, an economic rationale for it. We've been discussing this about the price of crude oil and why India had to look at its own interests at that point of time, standing up to America, West and everybody, European Union, and not caring even about the sanctions, so to speak. Then look at this new deal that we signed with Chabad, which de-risks and strengthens our position in the height of the entire Israel, Gaza, US support imbroglio. So you just see how steadfast and strong India has been through these various crises that we've seen internationally and how we've stood our own. The third point that was made by Jairam Ramesh was that there are Indians who are actually suffering and they're being recruited by the Russian army. Yeah. Now, over which Jaishankar Ji, a foreign minister, has actually has shown that this is one of the misgivings that we have, and this also be discussed, and there would be tangible outcomes just suggested and stated by envoy to Russia. So all this is being done, and precisely for these reasons that Jairam Ramesh poses to Modi ji when he goes to Russia is the reason that all the more reason that we have to be there and address and tackle all of these while we discuss other bigger.
Okay, Salman, 10-second interjection. I want to go to Dr. Kashin and Ambassador Chakravarti after that. Yeah, 10 seconds.
Shazia did say that we are whining. Of course, we are whining, Shazia. People are dying today in Manipur. They're still dying. Of course, you can call it that we are whining, but you have no answer. The Prime Minister has no answer. The BJP has no answer as to why the Prime Minister has not gone to visit the state for almost a year and a half, for 15 months now. That is shameful. It is shameful.
Okay, let me go to Dr. Kashin. Let me go to Dr. Kashin. You pointed this in the previous answer as well, Dr. Kashin, that has the relationship become far more transactional and less strategic now? for one reason, like I said, this whole thing about oil that you pointed out, $65 billion of trade, 60 billion of it is oil. And of course, it is Indian imports of oil from Russia. Has this become a transactional relationship, even in the defense segment? There used to be a time when almost 70% of India's defense imports used to come from Russia. That figure has fallen substantially. It's still about 50%, but India is today importing far more from the US, from Israel, from France, for example, than it used to do in the decades past. Has the India-Russia relationship become less strategic and more business-like, more transactional?
Well, I wouldn't say so. We had many decades, very long period when we had excellent strategic relations, a lot of military cooperation and cooperation on the international arena, but at the same time, Soviet-Indian or Russian-Indian relations lacked any economic basis. And now, for the first time in our relationship, we see this huge economic basis emerging. And that's very important for our strategic cooperation as well, because it will become more sustainable. We are still discussing global affairs. We are still interacting in BRICS, in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We have common positions or coordinated positions on many international issues. That all remains. Absolutely, India is diversifying its defense industrial partnerships. That's natural. Anyone would do so. And India is using the opportunities, but it's not undermining our cooperation in any way.
Ambassador Chakravarti, I'll give you the final word. What about on multilateral platforms? Look at the groupings that India is part of or is invited for, whether it is the G7 that the Prime Minister went to Italy recently, in the G20 last year, which India hosted, Russian President Putin could not come. Are we moving surely but firmly in the direction of being part of these Western multilateral arrangements? For SCO, for example, this time around, the Prime Minister could not travel. He did not travel. Is it becoming increasingly sort of difficult for India to be seen as, part of all of this, Western-inspired multilateral arrangements, G7, G20, etc., and also, keep one foot on its boat when it comes to SCO and BRICS, etc. Like I said, PM didn't go for SCO. The last BRICS summit, again, did not really yield much. And Russia and China seem to be dominating in those fora. And India doesn't seem to have that kind of pride of place that it did, for example, at the G7 last month.
Well, I think you have to look at the fact that India has participated. PM Modi may not have gone to SCO, but India did participate. And let me tell you that India will be participating in all these forums, whether Western or BRICS or SCO or wherever, that's there where we are members. Because as I said, we will be dealing with everybody. We believe in a multipolar world, so hence we will be dealing with everybody. And that's where the problem arises, because in the West, the slogan of either you are with us or against us has dominated their thinking for a very long time since the Cold War.
Yeah.
So that is where we are trying to say, hey, look, you can have relationships with everybody. It doesn't matter whether you believe in this or that, you are communist or capitalist. That's what we are trying to say. And it is in India's interest to do so. That is also a fundamental factor, that we have a long-standing relationship with Russia, not just a legacy thing, but we have a core interest with Russia, particularly because of the China factor. And we are also, because of the China factor, joining the West in some of the activities which help us in dealing with that situation.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Chakravarti, Professor Kashin, Salman Soz and Shazia Elmi for joining us. We'll see how this plays out. There's going to be a private dinner later tonight for Prime Minister Modi, hosted by President Putin. And tomorrow is the official day, official functions. There is the Indian community event in the morning. And then, of course, in the afternoon, there is the bilateral meeting followed by lunch and the delegation level talks. But let's shift focus away from India and Russia talk mainland Europe. There are a series of elections. Last week it was Britain. Now, this week, it is France. There is a political dead heat in France. There's a hung verdict after the first round surge that we saw of the far-right National Rally Party of Marine Le Pen. Now, it's been pushed to third spot after round two. The combination of the centrist parties and the left, known as the Republican Front, has launched a joint offensive against the National Rally. The question remains, can Emmanuel Macron, who called for early elections and his party ended up in second place, can he navigate the political waters to stay on in power and ensure a stable government? Here's a deep dive into the evolving situation, the political situation, the gridlock, as it were, in France after what was a deeply divided and deeply polarized election campaign.
Formation politique que j'ai repris.
Un an de plus d'immigration dérégulée.
France is faced with a hung parliament and deep political uncertainty after the second round of voting took place over the weekend. All the three main political groups, that's the left, the centre and the right, emerged from these snap elections with no one party or alliance getting a majority on its own. The preliminary results upended widespread predictions of a clear victory for the National Rally, which is Marine Le Pen's anti-immigrant far-right party. Instead, the left-wing New Popular Front, led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, finished first with close to 180 seats. The centrist coalition of President Emmanuel Macron was in second place with 150 seats, and trailing it was the National Rally and its allies, which took 140 seats, pushed down to third place. In the first round of elections last week, National Rally candidates had emerged as the frontrunners in a majority of seats. It was clear after that surprise emergence last week of National Rally, which ended up in first place after the first round, there was a scramble by both the centrists as well as the left-wing alliance to form a Republican front. As a result, over 200 candidates in over 550 across the length and breadth of France dropped out of three-way races. They found one unity candidate who could take on Marine Le Pen's party. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is the far-left leader, who is charismatic but also a polarizing voice of the left-wing alliance, he has now asked President Macron to call the New Popular Front to form the next government. But that is easier said than done. No side has emerged as a clear winner. France right now is looking almost ungovernable. The Paris Olympics are about to open in less than 3 weeks. The world's gaze is going to be on France. The left alliance did surge. The National Rally on the far right added dozens of seats to the National Assembly in its quota. And Mr. Macron's party, the centrist Renaissance, suffered a stinging defeat. His party lost about a third of the seats that it held in the outgoing parliament. The result was it is going to be a sharply divided lower house of parliament, and there, no governing coalition appeared immediately conceivable. And France, unlike in Germany or in Italy, has no history of running coalition governments, leave alone running them successfully. Macron's call for early elections has now come back to haunt him and his party. He had called for snap polls after Marine Le Pen's party had emerged victorious in the European Parliament elections, which happened last month. Macron was hoping to throw down the gauntlet at the French people, asking them to make the difficult choice of electing an unelectable far-right coalition. And France's voters seem to have called out Mr. Macron's bluff. Even with fewer seats than what was predicted, Marine Le Pen's National Rally has now assumed an important place in French politics. For decades now, first under her father, Jean-Luc Marine Le Pen, and now under her, the far right had been built around a history of overt racism and anti-Semitism, and that for decades made it unworthy of being elected to office. Marine Le Pen has disavowed from that past. But even in its rebranded form, the party's core message remains simple, that immigrants dilute France and the French national identity. So, Their response to it is tighter borders and stricter regulations, which are required to keep the immigrants out. The National Rally had even proposed keeping non-French-born citizens out of the state's social safety net, thereby creating two different classes of citizens. That, of course, was a wildly unpopular move. France has rejected that vision of the far right. They have voted overwhelmingly for change. It did not want more of the same, not more of Macron and the Renaissance Party. It seems to be a stinging message, particularly to the pro-business elites who were gathered around Macron. As per French law, Macron cannot run for office again, and he must leave in 2027 when his second term ends. The far left, the New Popular Front, campaigned on a platform that it would raise the monthly minimum wage across the country. It will lower the legal retirement age to 60 from 64, reintroduce a wealth tax, and freeze the prices of energy and gas. Instead of cutting immigration, as the National Rally was promising to, the left has said it would make the asylum process more generous. But this was also an equally controversial proposal which offended many in the heartland of France, many who were concerned about the boats of immigrants who've been coming in from North Africa. The New Popular Front, which is sharply divided between the moderate socialists on the one side and the far left, did very well among young people in the first round of voting. It also did very well in the housing districts that are heavily populated by North African immigrants around major cities, including the capital, Paris. Mélenchon has taken a strident pro-Palestine position, saying that France must even recognize an independent and free Palestine. Emmanuel Macron now appears to have two options. The first is to try and build a broad coalition which could stretch from the left to the moderates. It will also include some of his own disaffected elements in the Renaissance Party. This possibility, of course, is a bit remote at this stage. Macron, of course, has not made any secret of his intense dislike for Mélenchon, and that feeling is reciprocated. Both men cannot seem to stand each other. The second, which is a slightly less ambitious option, would be for Macron to try and form some sort of caretaker government under technocrats to handle the current business. Under the French constitution, another election cannot be held till at least another year. France needs to brace itself for some time of gridlock and political paralysis. Unfortunately, for France and the French people, it comes at a time when the world's gaze will be on Paris for the Olympic Games. All right, and shifting focus from France to the United Kingdom, where there is no hung parliament. It is a massive Labour Party surge, coming to victory after 14 years of Conservative rule, the biggest mandate that a Labour government has got in an entire generation. Keir Starmer, the man credited with Labour's revival, who led the party to its first victory since 2005, is the new Prime Minister of Britain. He's ousted Rishi Sunak, who took the reins after a bitter power struggle in the Conservative Party. But with Labour back at the helm of Britain, how does this impact India's ties with Britain? Joining us now on the broadcast is Manoj Ladva. He's the founder of the India Global Forum, which is the annual meeting of think tanks and strategic policy experts in London every year. Thank you very much, Mr. Ladva. First things first, it's a major win for the Labour Party, perhaps the biggest that they've seen since 1997 and Tony Blair and New Labour. What would you attribute such a massive mandate to by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party?
Thank you very much, Saka, for having me on your show. Look, it's a remarkable victory, as you've said, and something that was expected in many ways, but perhaps the size of the victory was a little in doubt. A number of factors, but essentially, I think after 14 years of Conservative rule, there was some fatigue within the British public as to the Conservative Party. And so you saw this as more of a rejection of the Conservative Party rather than anything else.
I do want to ask you in the context of India-UK ties, obviously a lot of the focus is going to be on the free trade agreement. It was supposed to have been clinched a couple of Diwalis ago, but that has not been the case. With a new Labour government in place, how do you see these negotiations progressing?
Yes, a good question, and something that has been on the minds of many people over the last few months. If you have a look at the Labour Party manifesto, it puts the FTA with India as a matter of priority between the UK and India, and something that the Labour Party is keen to pursue. Just a couple of weeks ago, the then Shadow Foreign Secretary and now Foreign Secretary of the UK, David Lammy, at India Global Forum in London, said very categorically that the FTA is something that he sees as a major priority for an incoming Labour government, and he and his colleagues will be pursuing that in all earnest. So I think all the right noises are being made. The question now is that how quickly can they get down to the negotiating table and start dealing with the tricky issues that still remain on the FTA.
One of the issues that we've seen having great resonance even on the campaign was immigration. It was a big talking point, and as far as India is concerned, either as part of the FTA or outside of it, India wants to try and include some kind of temporary work visas for Indian nationals, particularly in the high-tech sectors, to be able to work in the UK. With Labour now in power, Labour government in power, do you see that being sort of under a cloud, if you will?
No, I don't see it as under a cloud. I think both the UK and India have to recognize each other's various positions and constraints. As far as the UK is concerned, there is a sentiment, not only in the UK, but across Europe, of an anti-immigration sentiment that's prevailing. And so there is some degree of political pullback on allowing immigration to flow in the way in which it would have done maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So to that extent, there needs to be a recognition of political realities in the UK. Having said that, the UK does have various shortages of skilled occupations where India is abundantly well positioned to fill, and Indians are well positioned to fill, especially in the very highly skilled areas. So there is room for negotiation, there's room for maneuver, and there's room for opportunity between the two countries.
In the past, whenever we've had Labour governments, and even when Labour was not in government, when it was in opposition, there have been some tricky ties for India-UK ties, particularly on the question of Kashmir, on the question of the whole Khalistan issue and sort of soft separatism, if you will. I think when Jeremy Corbyn was the former leader of the Labour Party, he said something which was not particularly well taken here in India. How much should India be concerned about these sort of radical elements within Labour pushing the party, pushing the centre of the party in directions which would not be pleasing to India?
Well, it certainly is an issue, but having said that, what we've seen so far from Keir Starmer and the senior leadership of the Labour Party is that they want to focus very much on the wider strategic relationship with India and the economic relationship, and seem to be quite keen to ensure that these sorts of issues don't derail the relationship with India.
Mr. Ladba, I also want to get a word in about what's happened overnight across the channel in France. A big win by the left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front as it's known. Unexpected, because no one quite predicted this. Many were saying that the far-right party National Rally of Marine Le Pen would win. What do you make of what's happening in Europe? You have a Labour government in Britain now. You have most likely a left-wing plus centrist coalition that will likely take power in France. At a time when we were seeing strong men around Europe, even in America, do you see this sort of coming back of left-wing forces as sort of a change of the political cycle?
I think, look, there is mixed messages coming across. You have given the post-COVID scenario across the world that has disrupted global supply chains, and these economies are very much probably the most globally integrated economies anywhere in the world. This region certainly is. And secondly, you're seeing a huge impact because of the war in Ukraine as well, that has had an impact on oil prices, energy prices, and also huge concerns over security as well. So all of these factors are creating, I think, a significant amount of flux in this region, and therefore you're seeing big swings, as you see here in the UK, and surprise results in Europe as well. So it's a very difficult scenario to read, and I think the pollsters seem to be all over the place at the moment.
I do want to talk to you, since you mentioned the Russia-Ukraine war and how that's having a knock-on effect, particularly on the cost of living crisis across Europe. Prime Minister Modi is in Moscow. He's there today and tomorrow. He's meeting with President Putin. What is the view from London and Europe about what is seemingly a very different, nuanced position that India seems to have taken vis-a-vis Russia and this war? Is it something that, the folks in the West, friends and partners of India, understand, or is it something that they still are unhappy about?
Yeah, clearly the West started off quite disappointed with India's position, but I think that's been replaced with reality about India's relationship with Russia, India's position in the region and in the world, and to recognize that whilst the West may not agree with India's position, the reality is that India has taken its own stand, and that's in many ways being respected as well. It's also, I think, important to point out that there are various capitals in Europe that see in Prime Minister Modi as a potential go-between or a potential support to try and end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, because he is by far the most respected global democratically elected leader, given his experience over so many years on the international stage. And so a lot of eyes will be on the meeting with President Putin and Prime Minister Modi. And Prime Minister Modi has been on record, and he's repeated the fact that he believes that this is not an era for war, and that speaks volumes. And hopefully there'll be some degree of bearing on that as well in these discussions.
Mr. Manoj Ladwa, the founder of the India Global Forum, thank you very much for joining us and putting all of that into perspective. It's a very interesting time, certainly in Europe, and the view about an emerging India, a rising India from Europe is also undergoing some degree of nuance. Of course, the Prime Minister is in Moscow and will be tracking that diplomatic visit, an important one, the first time that the Prime Minister has traveled to Moscow, to Russia, since this war between Russia and Ukraine broke out. We will have that covered right here on CNN News 18. Our Anand Narasimhan will be covering that for us today and tomorrow. Thank you very much for tuning in to Brass Tacks. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time. Good night.
Has predicted further heavy downpours in the state during the next 3 to 4 days. And the commute in Mumbai is also disturbed following the waterlogging that has been triggered by the heavy rainfall in the city. And several areas of the city have completely submerged in water after the hefty downpours. Let's listen into some reactions of the residents over there.
अभी बारिश आ रहा है, अभी बारिश तो नेचर है, उसको आना चाहिए। अभी इतना पानी भर जाएगा तो कभी सोचा नहीं था। अभी बारिश के सामने किसकी चलती नहीं है भाई।
बारिश में कभी गड्ढे विड्ढे भी रहते हैं ना, बरोबर वो कभी किधर गड्ढा आदमी गिर गया, किधर है, बरोबर वो भी नहीं है ना। अभी आदमी कैसे जाएगा बारिश में, ट्रेन बंद, बस बंद, सब बंद।
अंधेरी से आया मैं बस पकड़ने। अभी तो पानी पूरा भरा हुआ है पूरे रास्ते में, चलने के लिए जगह नहीं है, बीच में तो चलना पड़ रहा है।
किस तरह का परेशानी हुई और क्या करना चाहिए?
सुविधा होनी चाहिए कुछ अच्छी खासी इसके लिए।
सबसे पहले मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगा, बीएमसी का बजट 50,000 करोड़। जी हाँ, बिल्कुल सही सुना मैंने, 50,000 करोड़ का बजट है बीएमसी का, सिर्फ मुंबई शहर का। और इस बीएमसी के बजट का 50,000 करोड़ का नजारा देखिए। ये जो नजारा है वो किसी नदी, नहर, समंदर का बिल्कुल नहीं दिख रहा है, लेकिन वैसा ही दिख रहा है और उससे ज्यादा खतरनाक दिख रहा है। ये नजारा है मुंबई के अंधेरी सबवे का। ये वो सबवे है जो सबर्बन को ईस्ट से वेस्ट जोड़ता है, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट सबवे है जो ईस्ट से वेस्ट जोड़ता है। लेकिन इस सबवे का देखिए पानी का प्रेशर देखिए, अगर मैं आपको अपने कैमरामैन अर्जुन को बोलूं दिखाएगा, पानी का प्रेशर देखिए कितना तेज है। और इसी प्रेशर के तहत से देखिए वो सबवे जा रहे हैं पानी में, ऊपर लोकल ट्रेन चल रही है। और ये सबवे बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है मुंबई सबर्बन के लिए, क्योंकि ये जो ईस्ट वेस्ट का जो इलाका है वो कनेक्ट करता है। लेकिन भारी बारिश की वजह से पूरा का पूरा सबवे को बंद कर दिया गया है। आसपास के इलाके हैं वो भी पुलिस से बंद कर दिए गए हैं। दूसरी तरफ की तस्वीरें दिखाऊंगा। देखिए लोगों को कितनी मुश्किलों का सामना करना पड़ रहा है, क्योंकि ऑफिस का टाइम होते जा रहा है। महिलाएं हो पुरुष हो, मुंबई में ऐसा होता है कि आप ऑफिस नहीं छोड़ सकते, आपको किसी भी तरीके से जाना पड़ेगा।
And News 18's Preeti Sompura is joining us live from Kalina. Preeti, how is the situation currently over there?
Now it started raining heavily across the suburban area of the Mumbai, and you can see, I can show you some of the pictures, like it's raining heavily, and now the office hours are also started. Besides this, Maharashtra government
It's all eyes on Moscow as Prime Minister Narendra Modi embarks on a historic visit. It's the Modi-Putin meet. It's Mission Moscow. What is going to be on the table? Join me, Anand Narsimhan, in our continuous coverage from Moscow here on CNN News 18.
presented by announced the school and colleges public holiday today, but despite the private offices are still working, so you can see the lots of traffic on the road. You can see the traffic on the road.
All right, we'll try to re-establish that connection with Preeti Sompura, who was giving us all the details of the rainfall that has lashed several parts of Mumbai, and that has led to severe waterlogging in a lot of areas. Andheri subway is closed. In fact, local train services have also been impacted due to the heavy rains that has led to waterlogging. Central and harbour lines are affected due to this, and because of this, the commuters are also facing a lot of difficulties while commuting to their workplaces, but schools and colleges have been ordered to remain shut today. Preeti Sompura is back with us. Preeti, please continue.
Yeah, the schools and colleges are closed today, but the private offices are working today, and so today is it's a peak hour. It's already started, so you can see behind me lots of traffic jam behind me. And besides this, IMD has also alerted few minutes ago, IMD has issued a new alert, and it says that orange alert till 3 p.m. today. Besides this, there is at around 1:50 p.m. there is a high tide in the sea. Like the high tide level is around 450 meter. High tide will take place across the Mumbai, but you can see that water logging is already there on the streets of the Mumbai, and entire Linking Road and SC Road is fully submerged into a water. Besides, these trains are also badly affected, especially the outbound train, and the express train is also affected due to the heavy rain. And Mumbai-Pune, all the express trains like Pragati Express and the Seagull Express train are already cancelled by the Central Railway. Besides this, like BMC has also issued a new alert to the Mumbaikar, like if you have any urgency, then only leave your home. Otherwise, please stay safe at the home. And you can see that already water logging is already there, and besides this, heavy rainfall is already started in the suburban parts of the Mumbai, and not only in Mumbai but the city connected to the Mumbai like Navi Mumbai, Thane, and even in the Raigad and in the Sindhudurg area, the heavy rainfall is already starting.
Preeti, since when has it been raining in Mumbai?
Since last 1 a.m. till 7 a.m., the IMD department has recorded around 300 millimeter rainfall in the Mumbai, which is very high, because earlier we have seen that around 100 mm to 150 mm, the entire Mumbai submerged into water. But this time,
hello, namaskar. This is First Post, and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We begin with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia, his first bilateral visit in the third term, a short trip, but with a lot of boxes to tick and significant timing. Putin is hosting Modi, leader of the world's biggest democracy,